Ms. Meeker, will you take the roll?
You betcha. Ms. Campbell?
Here.
Mr. Cotton?
Here.
Ms. Higgins?
Here.
Mr. Richards?
Here.
Ms. Walsh?
Here.
And I am here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us makes a quorum.
All right. And we are here to discuss the middle school and what elements we want in it. First, I'll ask the superintendent if there's any new information that you have to share. I think we left off with, we wanted to go with the hybrid, not the hybrid, the
Right, the geothermal.
geothermal
Right.
HVAC system.
Right.
We were intrigued by the Bank of New Hampshire type auditorium, but a little concerned about the cost estimates. Was looking for bonding information and cost estimates.
So we have some life cycle information for you.
Great.
Because that's probably the one, as we listened to everyone's concerns, that was the one area that people needed the more information about. What made sense, the geothermal, the hybrid, or a straight boiler system using, gas or whatever they decided to use. So they went back, and so we have folks here with us tonight that will help us work our way through that. But we have 5 slides. Yeah, just 5 slides on this topic. I know it's interesting information, so we'll walk through it slowly, and hopefully that will help it. I don't have a bond schedule. I know you wanted the bond schedule. I know you did. I don't have it.
I just
Jackson-
don't know how we can make decisions without
Well,
knowing what the impact on the tax rate is.
Well, we do have that. We have that in a slide that we went over the last time. We have.
That's not a good
but they were-
enough information.
Well, I don't have a bond schedule.
Will Mr. Dunn be back and be able to present this information before Monday?
Right. I will have that by Monday. I was not able to reach him today. So you want to do the life cycle costs?
Where they came from.
Mr.
thought they're from me, Belgium. Pass them around.
Holly, have you had luck in the past getting them?
There you go. It's part of it.
Just full screen.
Oh, that's good enough.
The shortcut. Can everybody see that? Try to get it full screen here. Do you guys want to take it away, and I'll try to make this a little bigger while you start.
Yeah, so this slide summarizes the 3 different options that we looked at, starting with the full geothermal on the left, then the hybrid geothermal, where we would have a supplemental systems such as like the electric boiler to complement our geothermal. It would be less wells than the full geothermal. And on the right side, we have air to water heat pumps with a supplemental system. And then this one, just air to water heat pumps replace the geothermal. From option to option, the difference is the heating and cooling equipment. Everything else remains the same. So it's mostly those blue squares is what changes and from option to option. Now, this slide summarizes our life cycle cost analysis. What we basically did, we ran an energy model to get the energy cost for the 3 options, and then we compared, mainly the energy cost and carried it out over 40 years to see what the overall life cycle cost is. As we go through the different options, and at the bottom, that table shows what the impact is from different, let's just say the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, what it provides for geothermal systems, and then also with the utility incentive. On the top table, where you have the annual energy cost, that is what we have for the total cost of the building. It includes your lighting, plug loads, domestic hot water, in addition to the HVAC energy cost. Of that, let's just say taking the top one, the ground source heat pump, the total energy cost is around $376,000. About 20% of that is on the heating and cooling equipment, which is what we're focusing on. So then, although going from option to option might be like 14,000 and then let's just say 40,000, when you look at just the heating and cooling, you're going from the ground source heat pump to the ground source heat pump and electric boiler. It's about a 20% increase in HVAC costs, in the heating and cooling. Then going from the ground source heat pump to the air to water heat pump is somewhere between a 50 to 60% increase in energy cost when you only look at the heating and cooling aspect. And then in the life cycle cost, we also look at some maintenance cost, which is to include just these head end pieces of equipment, not every little piece of HVAC. Then at the far right of that table, we list what we had for the replacement cost of the heat pumps and the head end systems. So it would be, for example, in the geothermal, it's your geothermal heat pumps and your pumps. Right now, we're using an overall electric rate. I believe it's a little bit more than what the Runlet Middle School is currently paying. I believe they had around 21 cents or so when you included the demand and the consumption. And obviously in the life cycle cost analysis, we include escalation for the utilities, for maintenance, and then also for the first costs. Are there any questions on this slide?
So as I look at this, it seems fairly clear to me, unless I'm reading it wrong, that the ground source heat pump is the cheapest way to go every which way.
Yes, and especially, and the reason at the bottom where we have with the 6% and 40% with the IRA, it's mainly to cover on the low end what we might get, and then on the high end what we might get. Right, especially one, yes.
So is there any reason we should be considering the other two options?
I mean, we just put them up there for a comparison.
Okay. I mean, my assumption honestly was going to be that that was going to be the most expensive option. And maybe it would pay itself back in time by efficiency. But I'm a little surprised that the others are more expensive to begin with.
Jess, were you going to say something?
This is not isn't that important, but I am very curious. This is for Matt. And I'm assuming we are going to go this route. It sounds like general consensus, but what does this do to staffing for your guys? And do we have folks, because this is fairly new for a lot of districts, like, are we ready for this? Is it different, more training? Do we need more people? What does that look like?
Yes and yes. We talked about it at one of our last meetings, that it is a little bit more sophisticated than a traditional system.
Right.
But I think it's worth pointing out, a lot of the support equipment is going to remain the same. So your air handler units, which we're reaching out, we have maintenance agreements with highly skilled personnel that maintain that equipment for us. But when you talk about the wells and pumps are pumps. I mean, they're but I think it is new, so we would need to train and have additional training than you would typically on a traditional system.
Okay, but
But
nothing
it doesn't scare me.
Okay.
I do think one of the concerns that we heard from the building committee in general, though I think there was consensus towards this as well, was that this is a bigger system than is in place in a lot of places in a relatively new
from what I see nowadays, a lot of the equipment, like the main difference is just where your equipment's going to be located. The geothermal itself is just a bunch of pipes in the ground, which should not have any maintenance at all. Then you have basically compressors, and with any of these options, you're going to have compressors. It's just, maybe if you look at your air to water heat pump, they're outside. In the geothermal one, they're indoors. So it is different, especially from what I think Concord has, but from system to system, it would be very similar. It is probably something, you might hire someone to service it, but they're becoming more and more popular. Yes.
Ms. Meeker?
Each meeting that I've been to where we've talked about this, thank you for being here again. The geothermal really is strikingly efficient, economical. I'm very excited that we are going down this path. For me, I just have to wonder if it's just a trust issue that more people, like, how come not everybody's doing it if it's the cheapest, easiest thing? And is it really just a trust issue of new technology? And, is that why it feels like we're stepping out into a vulnerable place?
I think traditionally it has been a more expensive option, but that's because of the recent development of the air-to-water heat pump and the efficiency of that system. Before we would always compare the ground source heat pump to a regular natural gas boiler, which is a much more lower cost system to install, and it's less efficient. But now with the air-to-water heat pump option that's in the market, I would say that's probably more a 5 to 8 year type system that's been out there that long. So that's not that system's more comparable in the cost and the service and the type of equipment compared to the ground source heat pump option. So I think that's part of the, I don't want to say confusion, but understanding of what the geothermal being more expensive. It's because before we were always comparing it to a much a lower first cost system.
Gotcha.
Where now to go all electric, these are the options you have.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep.
I might add, Keith, I think Mark shared with us a bunch of, Mark McLaughlin shared a bunch of geotherm systems that you guys have done. And I know
have
you
those
guys
lists,
have, so
actually.
we could.
I could pull
yeah.
those up and
Or we could
just
send that to
share
you.
those
We'll
with
post
you.
it, but
Sorry, it's at the very end.
I believe it was last week.
Yeah, well, Holly's finding that. Yeah, from our perspective, it's certainly new to the public school market in the last 5 to 10 years, but it's not new to the industry by any
Gotcha.
means. We've been designing geothermal systems since 2005. And actually, one of the first ones we did was in New Hampshire. It's up at Plymouth State University. Again, 300 wells. It's a very large system. Runs an entire hockey rink. So it may be new to the public school market. It's not new to the building industry. I
Great.
guess is the best way to.
Yeah.
And I think Harvey has a lot of experience in Maine with geothermal in public schools. So
Yeah,
that's,
you had
that's
a-
the second list
Yeah,
here.
that's second list there.
So,
So we've installed them since 2010.
Holly, could you enlarge that a little bit? That would be great.
And how's the school system for the 2010 school? Still working, still?
As far as we know, yes. I
They
mean,
have wood stoves now.
I was just checking. I mean, I
We're
think that was one of the concerns that people raised.
Yeah.
yeah, we certainly field those calls no matter how long we've been out of the building. That's the beauty of still being around. So we haven't heard otherwise, but these are, as you can see, 14 years old and not necessarily 200,000 square foot buildings, but certainly high square footage of building area that they're servicing. So it is not a new system. It is, as Chad has indicated, it's a bit of a new to the public middle school market. And the comparison that Chad also mentioned is that, yes, it's expensive compared to a first cost traditional boiler system, which is what you would see in buildings such as this historically. So that's what we're not comparing to, because that's not what we were tasked to do. It was all electric systems so that we can get the benefits of PV and things like that. So we could show you what that cost is and you'll say, oh wow, that's really expensive. And that's the conversation that you're hearing outside of these walls, I think, is
Right.
relative to that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these questions come down to we have to learn so that we can then turn around and tell our constituents what we've
Absolutely.
learned. And you've made it very accessible, so I appreciate you very much doing so.
Go back to this slide, or do you want to go to the next slide?
Are there any more questions on this?
Any more questions?
No?
I think we can go to the next slide.
I think just one thing I was going to point out, maybe Joe mentioned this last time, is what we have modeled is, we're trying to predict what the building, this isn't expected to be a very fine process. We've made some assumptions on how the building will be used, both during the school year with occupancy schedules, as well as summer programs. And we really just try to mimic what was done, what's been happening at Runlet for the past, 5-10 years with summer programs. So certainly as we move forward with the design, we'll fine tune and zero in on this analysis a little bit better from a ground source standpoint. But we do need to have discussions on with Matt and his team on or the occupancy schedules of the building to help focus in on that final number. The exercise that's the same for all options. So again, we're just trying to compare apples to apples.
Yep, absolutely. So you're saying if the number changes, we're not like, what happened?
Yeah, I mean, we're 10 or 15%
Right.
into the design, right?
Yep.
I mean,
No, I appreciate that.
yeah.
With this slide, we just tried to highlight what equipment is included in that replacement cost. So it is mainly your head end heating, cooling equipment.
Yeah, we showed this because we understood there might have been a question that, why is the replacement cost so much less than the initial construction cost? It's because we're only replacing the areas that are shaded in those boxes, not the entire distribution or all the air handling systems or what have you. It's really just focused on the head end systems.
And why is that? Just because that will be the next question.
Again, we try to keep as many things static as possible, right? So as Joe mentioned, in all three options, all the air handlers are identical. So whether we include those in the replacement cost, it's going to wash itself out because it's the same replacement cost in all three options.
It's not because they won't need to be replaced.
Certainly not.
Okay, I think that's the question.
Yeah.
So it's not that those
Yeah, no-
replacement costs are trying to compare trying to compare the differences as opposed to everything in the replacement costs.
Yeah. And every
Okay.
piece of equipment has a little bit different life cycle just based on how it operates and what its function is.
But we shouldn't assume that we're only going to have to spend 1.2 million over the life of this for
Correct. There will be other
equipment
costs
replacement.
associated with replacing fans in the air
Okay.
handling units, control valves, pumps, other things that aren't in that analysis.
Mr. Cotton?
Just a question, maybe even going back, but I know the ground source heat pump has got more wells than the other second option. Do you have a sense of how many wells it would take to do this?
I think our initial estimate was 170 for the full, and I want to say 140 for the hybrid one.
Okay.
But again, to us, as we get more into the design.
Yeah, I know.
And how, assuming that the same 20% contingency is in your numbers right now, if we needed 20 more wells, would we still be in budget, or would we need more money to? Like, how much is a well?
So, I don't remember what was in the budget. Wells are $40,000 to $1,000 a piece,
Okay.
roughly. I don't know what was actually carried in the exact budget, but, so what we're basing this on right now is an assumption based on our knowledge of geothermal systems that Holly put up there, and what the actual capacity of a single well is. Again, that's based on similar projects, over the last 15 years. The next step, once we get into design, is to do what's called a test well, where we actually engage a driller to come here and put a well in the ground, and they'll do an analysis of it, and they'll tell us what the capacity of that well is. So it will change a little bit. 170 isn't. We're not gonna have 170 at the end of the day. But I think we're pretty good with a number. I think we're probably on the conservative side, which, we wouldn't go the other way unless something drastic is found there that we don't know about.
Right.
400 feet in the ground.
Actually, I feel like at a previous meeting, we talked about test wells, and I
We
feel
did.
like we all were
Yeah.
like, go do it.
Yep,
So,
and we're working with two companies right now to get proposals from them.
Perfect.
So that we can get that process moving.
excellent,
Yeah.
thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
So this slide just presents some of the results from our life cycle cost. Starting from the left bar, that is your capital cost, the first cost of primarily the mechanical systems, and then I believe the electrical and plumbing needed to support them. The green bar next to it is what we have as the total energy cost over the 40-year life cycle. That tall bar is what we have as the present value life cycle cost. So it takes all of your first cost, maintenance costs, energy costs, and replacement costs over the 40 years and puts it into today's dollars. The small bar is taking that value and putting it into an annual cost. And I guess, again, like your questions before, when you look at because our replacement cost is just for the head end systems, the overall life cycle cost, it reflects replacing the head end systems, but not everything.
Do you wanna go to the next
Yeah.
slide?
This slide, it shows the life cycle cost when you apply different levels of the either tax credits and also utility rebates. So we have the geothermal, full geothermal on the left, the hybrid in the middle, and the air-to-water heat pumps on the right. So it shows that as you start to apply the incentives for the geothermal to both of the geothermal options, that first cost and the life cycle cost starts to drop away, while the air-to-water heat pump, because it's not eligible for the same tax credits, basically stays the same throughout. And again, we have that 6% and 40% tax credit from the IRA, just to give a range of the minimum to the best. It could fall just anywhere in between that.
Questions? Mr. Cotton?
Just another completely not talking about this slide at all question. But we're using a 40-year life cycle. Given the age of the current runlet, do these things last 40 years? Do they maybe last 50 years? Do they?
So
I mean, I know different parts are gonna have to be replaced over time, but for example, the wells themselves.
pipes themselves, I believe a lot of the manufacturers will warranty their pipes for 50 years. So I mean, it's just plastic in the ground surrounded by grout. It should last for a very long time. When we did the replacement cost, we did 25 years for the geothermal and 20 years for the air-to-water heat pump. The main reason for the difference is that your geothermal, everything's inside. It's not exposed to the elements, versus the air-to-water heat pumps, it's outside, exposed to the UV, the elements.
Okay. So Holly, maybe a question for you. Have we, in our planning, the inside versus outside, have we taken that into account on the square footage of the building,
Yeah,
et cetera?
we've gotten guidelines from RFS about the amount of interior mechanical space that we need. So
Okay, thank you.
been providing that.
Any
I just
other
want to add one
questions?
thing to Joe's comment about the life cycle of the pipe. So again, they warranty their pipes for 50 years. When it's in the vertical, when it's in a hole, it's actually grouted into place, so it's actually surrounded by grout, or a cement-based slurry. when you think of a pipe, they're gonna make as long a, they're gonna install it in a single piece, or long a piece as they can. When they do the connections, it's not gonna be what you would think in your house or in a building where it's a mechanical connection of prone to leaking. It's actually heat welded together, so it's almost like it's welding plastic is what it is. So it's a very rigid joint. It's not gonna fail at the joint, it's gonna fail somewhere else. So it's very reliable.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. You have more slides?
That was the last slide. We have other, images if you have questions about things, so.
So I think another question that was left open from our last meeting was playing fields, and there was some concern that what was here doesn't accurately replicate what we already have at Runlet and the uses that we need. And so I think Mr. Shard, I guess more information.
Yeah, I mean, I've had, thorough conversations with Athletic Director Mello, and congratulations to his retirement, and actually meeting with the new high school athletic director this Wednesday afternoon in Scott Owen, just to talk about athletic programming. But the perspective of the athletic department is that we really could use 3 fields. At very least the 2, and we talked about one of the fields would be a baseball softball field, which could be multi-purpose. The goal would be to, as you see this right here, to have, like Scott Owen would describe it as, making sure you have like a square box. So with that softball baseball field, you could also practice soccer on that. He describes you need like a square space so you can practice pretty much anything. And then, the other 2 fields as well. Those, when we've had these conversations, this isn't something like a luxury or something that we need for our current athletic programs.
So I think that was the question, though, that about whether there was enough for the current athletic programs. And you're saying this soccer, baseball would also meet the needs of your 12 soccer teams?
6. I'm not trying to be a wise guy, but
Sorry,
that's all right.
I was thinking 6 boys, 6 girls, 2 boys, 2
yeah.
girls. So that would meet the needs of that as well?
That space right there, yeah, we felt that would meet the needs, definitely. And we would use that softball, baseball field as like outside of the spring as an additional practice surface for our fall sports. You make a square out of it.
When we go forward with setting the price, there are still opportunities to discuss placement of the fields, because I think there's some disagreement about whether they should be closer to Portsmouth Street, whether we should be using that space in between the 2 schools. I don't think we need to argue it out now, as long as we can move those things around as we go.
Correct. It is very easy to move around fields. And I know there's also been, discussion about sort of turf versus synthetic turf versus natural turf. Those conversations can continue. We're working on compiling some information that we can present, to the board at some point to talk about the sort of pros and cons of synthetic versus natural turf. So those are decisions that don't need to be made right away.
Okay. Mr.
So, let me ask the question, if we don't go synthetic and it's a natural turf, and we do go with irrigation and that type of thing, is it advantageous, or is it less expensive to have the fields together? Or is it really just there's a pipe comes up and you put 3 different systems in, whether it's next to each other or whether it's spread a couple different ways?
Well, I think you wouldn't want to pull a field down to Portsmouth Street if you were going to irrigate, right? Because that's a lot more piping to get down to Portsmouth Street. I mean, unless you could come off the, Millbrook School somehow. So, I mean, that's something that we can look at in greater detail as we move forward.
I just would ask that as you examine and investigate various configuration options, that you consider that we want to minimize that cost.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Jim, Jim, just a point of clarification, there is no irrigation systems at Millbrook or Broken Ground, so it wasn't like they could even bring a system off of those schools to the
No,
Portsmouth
actually-
that, right. yeah.
Is there an irrigation system anywhere?
There's irrigation anywhere.
It's
Well-
called a sprinkler.
You run the hose?
Memorial Field has its own built-in
Oh,
Yeah,
irrigation system.
natural
Yeah, it's called a
irrigation,
lake.
up to, you
Called a
know,
swamp, yeah.
12 to 18 inches deep, yes.
Okay. Any additional, so my memory on the fields was that we were keeping them all lawn at this point. That there was consensus on that, that we wanted to keep field 3 for the softball, baseball. Please, somebody correct me if you have a different memory. We were keeping the basketball court requested by the students and the irrigation. And
I've still got questions about whether we put softball and baseball in initially or whether we defer that.
Yeah.
Um,
although,
I think, field 1 and 2 as depicted there makes sense.
I think the question is, we would need a field 3/4 to replicate what we have in currently. So do we include the layout for baseball and softball, which looks like it's about an extra $300,000? Or, and we can defer that, but we probably do need
A third field.
a third.
A third field, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to speak for Scotto and,
Yep.
or again, the athletic directors at the high school, but we currently have 3 field spaces.
Yep.
That works.
Having spent roughly 30 hours a week for 25 years in this town coaching on athletic fields, I can tell you they're never empty, and you're never going to have too many fields. So in looking at this from my perspective, thinking if I were the AD at Runlet and I had to facilitate after-school activities for the middle school, that's exactly right. It's not too many, definitely not too many. I don't think it would make sense to not build it as is. Because then come spring, where do they play softball and baseball? Now they have to go to a field or get bused somewhere.
Thank you.
Do you want to address the track?
I don't know that we've made a decision on the track, so that would be an extra 800,000 roughly on one of the fields.
Would it be built as like a regulation distance 400-meter track? Yeah, you don't want to build one that isn't, right?
Correct.
So I will say, given what's going on at Memorial Field, this could potentially for several years be our city track. It could be our high school track. We're in a heap of trouble with Memorial Field and our track with big divots and cracks and stuff in it. I know money, but I could, just based on the timing of Memorial Field, I could see where this would get a ton of use immediately from,
I'd be supportive of the track.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think not only all of the things that Barb mentioned, but in addition, track has such a large number of
Yeah.
students that participate in it, and it also will be available to the community.
That's
as well.
right, yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
community,
a lot of
community
people,
resource.
there's a lot of people who either walk or run
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
are.
And that would be a nice addition to that side of the city, which
Yeah,
doesn't
big
have
time.
access
Yes,
to
doesn't have
that.
anything like that.
Which I think pretty much closes out our field discussion, knowing that we don't have, I think we have different combination of members than the last time we had this discussion. And I think the one challenge, and just going back to the site stuff, I think we had agreed on pretty much all of the recommendations of removals and not the ads on the site stuff, with the exception of the interior ramp, which we were in agreement that we would like to have, or at least to continue to develop the concept of.
Holly, do you have that, would you show that up?
Yep, I
Just
can
for
pull that up
everybody so
again.
they can take a peek at it? But the outside ramp you've eliminated, is that what you're saying?
Right,
Okay.
right.
Yeah.
The indoor ramp
No sense.
makes much better sense. I mean, I applaud the effort and I appreciate that we need to be thinking about everybody that's gonna be utilizing the school. I think,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I think the one thing we heard is, is that ramp wide enough? Should we replace the staircase with just a ramp? And that you were going to continue to look at that.
Yeah, we have room to make that ramp wider. Actually, we're exploring some other configurations for the ramp too, which we'll share with you in the future. We think there are a lot of possibilities with the ramp. We think it could be an amenity for the school.
I love it.
But we're not going over the ad price that you have there now.
No, we will try to work to that price, yes.
Or lower. Or lower.
We're fine with lower, that's cool.
Well, I think it was also the perception of the building and was it accessible? And by
Right.
mere virtue of walking into a building and seeing, incredible steps was a negative in terms of somebody that needed access. And this clearly, the way it's designed, would afford that. It looks like you have stairs there, but the ramp is really over on the side,
Right.
on the left-hand side, if you're looking at it, yeah.
Although I think one of the things we heard from the community is that if you're trying for universal design, that, if there's a ramp that everyone could use to go with the ramp that everyone could use, as opposed to the stairs and the ramp, but to make the ramp accessible to everybody as opposed to building
Two things.
both.
Yeah.
I like the design of it, though.
One of the things that we've seen and observed in other schools that have that, it's often when the kids come in the morning and they're waiting before they go in a particular area, you'll see them sitting on those stairs, not the ones going up where the railing is, but on that front side, sort of, you'll see kids sitting there in the morning, even during the day.
communal space.
And it's just another place for them to be.
But this is something we can continue to fine tune.
Yeah.
And I don't suppose we have any more estimates, thoughts on the theater ideas?
We are working on that, and
Okay.
we're working on reducing kind of the square footage. I think we have some good ideas for targeting that 6,000 square foot reduction. And we're looking at that in conjunction with the smaller theater, and we're looking at, 3 models for the theater, 450 fixed with a balcony, 450 fixed without a balcony, and then 450 seat flexible performance space. So we're drawing all 3 options right now, and I think each option will yield a significant square footage savings, and we just need to dive in a little deeper to how much the flexibility of that multipurpose theater adds to the price tag. So, we're gonna work with Harvey on that as we move forward, so we can get a better idea of the cost.
Holly, what was the regulations for the Department of Ed in terms of funding and relative to the size of the auditorium?
Right, so the DOE will compensate you for 450 seats, so we would be,
Keeping it.
At that.
yeah.
Yep.
So the whole auditorium would be, eligible for compensation.
And with all the options, it keeps the stage and the backstage space.
Yes, correct, and some dressing room space, and it also, in each option, it backs onto kind of the music wing. So you could use all of those music spaces as sort of back of house for performances, which is a really common strategy.
Can you put those up, Holly?
Yep.
That would be great, thank you.
So this is the 900 seat auditorium, but you can see behind the stage, we have dressing rooms and then sort of the whole suite of music spaces. There are also toilet rooms back here behind behind the stage. And, you know, there's a corridor with a door, so you can close this door off. You're not seeing kind of the back of house experience as you're entering to, you know, go to a performance. So it's all sort of supported kind of behind closed doors. And then the other options that we looked at take a similar approach.
Can you go back to those options again, Holly?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Am I
The
missing
actual
parts? Here we
picture?
go. So this is the multi-purpose theater. So you can see it has sort of the same back of house amenities. It has 2 dressing rooms, you know, there's some toilet rooms, and then, you know, there are these 4 music spaces that could all be used for staging kind of a performance. So this has 450 seats that are movable. So basically this bank of seating right here is retractable, just like the seats in the existing NAR. The seats in the front are just movable chairs, and we've got a large storage room here that could store all of those movable chairs. And then there is a fixed balcony that rings the upper level of the theater. Yeah. Here we go. So this is a very similar theater to what we're proposing. You can see these are the flexible seats here that retract back in to the wall. You're seeing kind of the fixed balcony around the top. So basically those retractable seats kind of meet the fixed balcony. So when you pull those seats out, they kind of connect the balcony.
So is there no stage in this, like they would just perform on the floor?
Well, there is a stage actually. What happens is that this front part of the theater has a removable floor. So just like if you've ever seen like a pit filler where,
Yeah.
you know, there's a orchestra pit, sometimes they cover that orchestra pit over. So the idea is that you would kind of have sections of removable floor here that would expose kind of a stepped seats in the front. And then basically that creates your stage.
But the stage is still just the floor.
The stage is at the floor level, but your first row of seats is, you know.
So is there
3 feet.
backstage areas? My problem with this from a theater perspective is it's not a theater. So any drama or theater program doesn't have an adequate. I'm not a fan of multi-purpose rooms just because
Yep.
it's okay for everybody and not great for anybody.
Right, so I think this is a little bit different in that what you're seeing right here is basically what you would kind of consider the proscenium in a traditional theater.
Yep.
So there is, in this configuration, there is stage basically behind this floor area.
No, I understand all of
Yeah.
that. But in the wings, backstage, all of that area.
Yeah, you still have the same amount of wing space that you do
Okay.
in the other theater, right? So you have wings on both sides. So
Because
this
the new
is-
activity room has none of that. It's
Right,
all
yeah, no, this has wings.
Okay.
Yeah. And we also have a gallery, and we're showing a catwalk. So, you know, it's more like a traditional theater than an NAR is.
It was helpful for me to picture it when we compared it to Bank of New Hampshire stage. So similar to that, where it still has that stage and it has that separate feel.
Well, and that's not designed to be, that's designed to be the movie, you know, it's designed,
That's true.
you know, it's not meant to be a big theatrical performing
Yeah.
place. It's very small
Yeah.
things, you know, stage events happen
Yeah.
down the street. So that's why I like to be particular about it, you know?
Yeah.
I share your concerns, Barb, where I'm just not sure, like, I feel like we're
If we're piling money into a new
we're trying
building.
to get so much more out of a space than maybe is possible for how much we're spending.
Right.
And that if we're gonna spend 4 and it's 6 to get us all the way there, should we be talking about that?
Right.
Although I think we heard the concern that we would then need another second multi-purpose space because we have 2 multi-purpose
Wrestling.
spaces in the current building.
Right, right, so that's always a balance, but
Can I ask a question? Not about the stage?
Yeah.
How does the music wing compare to the existing music space at the Rundle School?
Great question, Jim. And we use 4 spaces because we have a choral program, we have a strings orchestra program, we have a band program, and we have like a general music program as well. So the kids have those 4 opportunities, and when the kids go to music, they go into those 4 different spaces, depending on what they chose.
Okay. And what do we have now? 4 spaces?
Yeah.
4 spaces, yeah.
And they're used.
They're u-
I was
yep.
gonna say, I don't know for sure, but it's my impression that they are used pretty continuously.
Yep, they are, yep. We use the spaces, yep.
Okay, so this is.
Because then it's, it's a
this is
nice thing to have.
This is basically, reproducing what we have,
Yep.
but much upgraded, I hope.
Yes, I would say that.
I've been in those spaces.
I took music in those spaces.
The music spaces.
Although right now, the retractable seat option is more expensive than the just straight 450 seat theater. So if we go with that, we still have options to
Right.
go different, which I think leads me to my next problem, which is this is all great. We've gone through this, but we don't know how much it all adds up to, and we don't know how much it would cost taxpayers. And without that information, it's really hard to say, okay, we're good. So I think we're going to need that for Monday
Well, you
night.
have it for Monday, but at least now we know what you're interested in.
Yep.
I wrote down 3 or 4 things tonight that I know that will be represented in that number. And so then the bond schedule, and again, that's hypothetical too, because the bond rates change.
Yes.
I
Yes.
think Jack was using a 4.5
4.5.
when he did an original bond schedule, based on the entire project with or without, state aid and with or without your money that you have in your trust fund.
I have one more question, just about big spaces. So in the gymnasium, will there be an indoor space that can fit the entire student body and teachers? Like I know at Concord High School, homecoming pep rally, everyone's in there, you're crammed, and people are standing around, but do we have a space in this building where if there was an all-school assembly, everybody could go?
I thought the gymnasium.
Well, I thought we agreed that the gymnasium could do that.
Okay, I just want to make
I
sure.
just want to confirm. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
correct. It's a 9,000 square foot gymnasium. I think we've calculated it can hold about 1,200 people. Or is that, no?
Because that's an issue I know at the
Little bit
high
less,
school, there really isn't a
sorry.
space where you can have everybody comfortably, and so
So I
it's difficult.
3 plus, yeah, I think around 1,000 people.
Yeah.
So we figured, the largest gathering that you would have would be like a graduation,
Yeah.
right? So you'd have a full class of, say, 300, plus, 3 to 4 guests for every person. So, we did a layout, and then we can share that with you, but, I can't remember what the bleachers hold to, but those are flexible. We can kind of adjust the bleachers to reach a target count that you have.
If you go 800 students, which we've been using, right? We're a little bit under that right now. And then you add the staff, you're talking 100
Right,
plus
right,
staff.
right,
So
that's
you're
why I asked,
already
yeah.
900 plus.
Yeah.
So you want to be able to have everybody
Right.
in one space. The
Well, I think it's
auditorium won't do
important,
that.
yeah. No, and that's fine, as long as the gym
I had a
does.
question, Holly, about the auditorium. Going from the 900 seat auditorium down to a 450, even with the different, the way it's laid out, I get that. The amount of square footage that's lessened in this project, what was that?
It's about 4,500 square feet. So that is reflected though, in the numbers that were provided in the spreadsheet.
Right.
So the 6,000 square foot reduction that we're targeting is in addition to that.
Okay.
So just to recap what I think we've agreed, we're keeping, where the current consensus has been over our meetings. We're keeping the gym at 9,000. Keeping the multi-purpose room at 5,000 was my memory?
Yep.
Is that my notes? Eliminating the 900 seat auditorium and looking towards the 450 multi-purpose theater. Removing the fly loft catwalk, eliminating the greenhouse and reducing the square footage by 6,000 square feet. We're choosing the all ground source heat pump. We are keeping the roof-mounted solar. We have not yet decided on all of the grounds-mounted solar, but would like to make that work as we can think about options to get to zero on this building. We are keeping all of the fields lawn. We are keeping all of the fields. We are adding the irrigation, and we're keeping the basketball court. We agreed with eliminating the cell phone booster.
We did?
Yes, because there were other ways to
Okay.
address it, is my memory. That we were going to be able to use grant funds for that. And that it was going to happen now for the other buildings.
Okay,
So,
let's do them for all the buildings.
Yes,
please.
we are eliminating an exterior accessibility ramp. The abutters fence, I believe we were keeping, but it might be,
We're gonna keep that, but can you show us where the abutters?
Yeah, I was just gonna
Yeah.
ask that same question.
Could you show us what it is?
It's going up the side, right?
I just wanna know.
Along here?
Where is the abutters fence?
Right.
Here? Is it here, here? I'm curious as to, my initial
and I
assumption
thought they
was
was
here,
originally
here.
they were
Yeah.
Or is it over
interested back
here?
here
Yes,
to make
yes,
sure.
yes, yes.
So I guess when you did that, just, can you clarify what the abutters fence
I don't remember where it was.
is?
Or is that still a work in
I
progress?
don't remember where it was.
I
I
think we had
definitely thought
heard
it was
From
not.
people on South Curtisville, that they wanted to block this off because they didn't want people.
I thought
I
it
was
was,
in a fence,
Parents
but
going
that
up
might
that
have been.
road.
I thought it was definitely
North
people
Curtis.
along the side of the driveway.
Wait, yeah,
Very-
that's my,
Very concerned about.
so we have more information on the
Yes.
abutters fence we need.
But we should leave it in the
Go
budget.
back to your other elevation, I think you should.
Back to this?
Yeah.
We were keeping granite curbing.
It's
the left side of it.
Yeah, if you look at this bird's eye view, and you look on the left side, okay, and you see where those homes are, and then you have some, obviously forest area, that's where the fence is, because people were worried that they would come in on that street, and then the kids
Cut
would,
through.
the kids would cut through, and they'd have traffic like you have everywhere else.
Yeah.
And they were trying to avoid that. So by having a fence and closing it off, that would reduce that. And I agree. Jack and I walked out there. My biggest issue is that there's signage for the walking
the
and the
trail.
conservation areas. So how does that play with people who want to come in that way to walk the trail? So that's something we're going to have to deal with. But that's my understanding is where that fence is. And that was the petition that you received from that group?
Right.
Do you remember that? The families that live over there and
Yeah.
in the surrounding areas, I believe. But maybe we can get a better picture the next time
Yes,
about
yeah, we
where it
can do
is.
that.
That would be great. Yeah, we'll do that.
I believe we were keeping granite curbing,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
adding to
Yeah.
it, not subtracting from it.
Well, your engineer was pretty adamant about that. She
She made a good
said do
case.
Granite
not-
curb, yeah.
Otherwise, we'll be replacing it all
Yeah,
the
and
time.
she's absolutely right.
Not adding the snow melt,
Right.
adding the interior ramp. I believe we did not want to remove the elevator.
No, we should keep a
We
second
wanted to keep
elevator.
the elevator, but we were okay staying with polished concrete. Or we were
Yeah.
okay with staying with epoxy,
Whatever the cheaper.
whatever the current flooring
Right,
plan
replace
is.
the terrazzo on
Polished
the
concrete is less expensive.
Okay.
Right, yeah, we would like that. I would like that.
And with all the traffic you have in a building, it really holds up very well. I mean, you can see that in big box stores, they use it because of the traffic, and yet it's clean and neat, and I think it's a good option.
You don't have to replace individual tiles.
That's right.
Any other thoughts, questions, concerns, subtractions, additions?
For the total.
Oh, for the
with all
totals.
the prices.
Yeah, if we ever needed
Yeah.
to, even if we ever said we didn't like the polished concrete, we could put a floor over that.
Yes.
Right,
You want
that's
It's
easy.
a lot harder to take out.
Yeah.
Take off the block.
The epoxy finish.
What's the price savings between the 450 seat and a 900 seat auditorium?
You save 1 million, 1.7 million. Yeah,
That's a chunk.
yeah.
Yeah. I hate to do this, I still think the low is too high, but I don't know what else we can take out.
Well, and that's why I think we have to look at it as a, I mean, there are other things, we could take out auditoriums altogether, right? I mean, those are,
Would it help if we put up the budget so that you could go through it
I
and
would
then
like
at
to
least
do
have a
it
bottom?
with an understanding of the tax impact.
Oh, I
because doing
understand, I
it-
do understand that.
Right.
Doing
Because
it
the
in-
number, the big number,
It's the number, that number
But,
is.
but that number, I think we need to have that conversation and how it relates to taxpayer.
Because that number today is a big number, but when you bond something, you have
With
a
building aid.
continuous number. and
Right,
building
right.
aid, I think,
Well,
is
the
more
building
important.
aid is the big question.
Yes.
That'll be
Right.
the
Which is
I
what,
agree,
Clearly.
I agree.
so, yeah.
Well, I will have that on Monday.
Okay.
I will have that on Monday.
Okay.
so can we do a little housekeeping now?
What's that?
Do you wanna-
Does anyone have anything else on this? If not, I think Ms. Meeker had.
I sure do. So I'm gonna give a quick summary of what I'm about to do, and then you can decide whether or not you would like to stay for it. Before we had our public Q&As, we encouraged members of the public to submit questions in writing to give us time to prepare answers. We had two constituents, Deborah Samaha and Dan Ridley, submitted several questions on June 13th, for which the district prepared answers for us to then provide at the public Q&A. There was a little misunderstanding. They thought that we would just jump into those questions. We thought they would get up and ask those questions. 8 o'clock came around and we ended the session without addressing any of them. In order to sort of rectify that, I had offered up the July 1st meeting during public comment as a time to backfill so that we could address those questions and answers. But I was out of town and that got skipped. So here we are at a work session with our architects and our board here. It is our next opportunity to put their questions on the public record, to be heard on video, to be answered on video. Anyone is welcome to chime in, but for me, this is really just taking 10 minutes to do for our constituents what we said we would do for them in June, and so it's really just a little bit of housekeeping. A lot of the questions are also questions that were asked by other constituents during these Q&As, so they will be a little bit repetitive, but I just wanted to make sure that we were doing our due diligence.
And I do want to point out that the answers to these questions have been posted on the middle school website for a number of weeks already.
Yes, so
they have been answered.
To
It's
that
not on
end,
video.
to that end, the questions, the answers were provided to the constituents. They had submitted follow-up questions. The district has prepared follow-up answers. We will not be addressing those tonight. This was just a matter of getting the original questions answered in the Q&A format, so that it's not just posted on the website, but just addressed in one of our public meetings, so they can point to a video and say, here are our concerns. With that, we can take a recess and come back for those who would like to stay for it, or I can dive in, however you guys want to do it.
I just want to say thank you. And I'm sorry. And as somebody who I've asked the same question over and over again, is sometimes we just need to hear it in different ways, different formats. So even though they may have been answered, hearing it differently helps so much. So thank you. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I say we dive in.
Dive
All
in.
right, let's go. Their initial letter had a lot of statements. I will not be reading their statements. I'll only be reading the questions. The first is, what is the vision for the current Renlet site if you proceed with the broken ground site? The answer, I think we all know, is no decision has been made regarding possible future use of the Renlet site at this time. Many ideas have been floated by the community. There is a subcommittee that will be formed to discuss those ideas at a later date. I happen to be the board member that's assigned to that subcommittee when it does come together, but I personally don't feel comfortable gathering that subcommittee until we break ground or know what's going on with building aids, so it's a little bit further down the line. And again, anybody feel free to jump in at any time. Please provide the number of kids that are within the radius of Runlet that are expected to bike or walk. Please confirm what that radius is. Please provide the number of kids that will be within the same radius of the new site at Broken Ground. Will you maintain the same radius? There are a few other questions, but they're all related. It is challenging, agreed, that to get an exact number of students that walk or ride their bikes to Runlet Middle School. The radius for students to take the bus is 1.5 miles, the same for Broken Ground site, but as with other areas throughout the city, the board can adjust the walking zone to ensure safe travel for students. I believe we've had a few conversations about that, and I think that will come up at future meetings. The number of students that are eligible to ride the bus is 650. In November 2023, a traffic study identified 21 students that crossed South Street and entered the Runlet driveway. Some of them may have been drop-offs. As a parent who also does drop-offs, I'm sure that's true. We estimate between 45 and 70 students walk or bike on any given day. We are not able to identify which students may be driven to school and dropped off within a few blocks. The district currently provides late buses for students at the middle school level. That was another question about busing. And while grant funding ended several years ago, the district continues to support the philosophy of the Safe Routes Schools program. Regarding the city's the impact on city budget for our school construction, please address, if any, costs regarding infrastructure to build this school, and if they were factored into the city's budget or capital improvement plan. What exactly are the proposed infrastructure costs associated with the move to the Broken Ground site? In November of 2023, HMFH Architects presented the results of a traffic study, water and sewer capacity, and a comparison of the infrastructure costs between South Street and Broken Ground. The district has been working with the city staff for the last 12 months to share information and receive feedback. The pump station is part of the city infrastructure plan to support water pressure for the residents on the east side as a whole. So it really doesn't just impact our school, it affects the community as a whole. The district will have ample water, but will require increased water pressure for the fire protection system at the school.
I just would add there that there is an alternative to meet that need if the city doesn't go forward with the pump station. And that there were also traffic and road changes that would have been needed if we stayed at the Runlet site.
Yep, 100%. And I think if I'm right, they did pass in this year's city budget an upgrade to the pump station.
It's in their capital plan.
Yeah, it's in their capital plan. So it's moving forward. We look forward to working with the city on that collaboration. Regarding safety, when looking at resources regarding safety and crisis management in our community, we note that several schools, including high school, middle school, and at least 2 elementary schools, are within a mile of police, fire, rescue, and hospital. Is placing the new middle school at the Broken Ground site the safest site for emergency response in a crisis situation? In terms of safety and crisis management, the district currently has 580 students and 100 staff at Broken Ground and Millbrook schools. They have always received timely support from the Concord Police Department and Concord Fire Department. There is a fire substation on Loudon Road within 2 miles of the school. The police and fire departments attend the development review team meetings for the project.
I will also add that before we voted on the location, I reached out to both the police and fire chief and asked them if they had concerns for one location over another, and they said they did not.
Excellent. And I agree. I think it's sometimes hard to visualize it. It feels like Broken Ground so far away. But it's a small town, and we all need to we can get where we need to go, emergency services included. All right, we're cranking. What inflation costs are being factored into the proposed budget for the new middle school? What is the expectation of the board on the interest rates for borrowing costs? Could the district refinance if the rates go down? There is a 3% annual escalation cost included to the midpoint of construction. This is standard practice in pre-estimation. The district refinanced the 3 elementary schools, providing a reduction of $440,000 annually. So fingers crossed. If Concord does not get the state aid as requested, what is the plan? Great question.
Pivot.
Pivot. Without state building aid, the board has indicated, and I think everybody would agree, that the impact would be too high, and the board intends to wait until building aid is confirmed before final project approval. With or without building aid, the needs of the Runlet Middle School are high, and the cost of renovation is nearly the same as building a new facility. I personally get down about this all the time. I worry about building all the time. I wish Liz were here because she always brings me out of that funk to just say, keep moving forward, right? Like, we just, it's coming, we'll get it, and
You can control what you can
we
control.
can control what you can control, and we will deal with it when that time comes. The City of Concord has a master plan. In the 230-page document, the broken ground area is discussed as a priority for open space. Please make sure the plan to relocate acknowledges and respects the intent of the city and its citizens to protect this area. I did want to mention something that in doing my own research in the master plan, that it talks about preserving the broken ground site, but they're not talking about our school site. They're talking about something much further east, and it's a continuous natural area. I think it's a major point of confusion for a lot of our community members because we call this the broken ground site.
Well, it was named after the broken ground, which
Exactly,
is that area of Concord.
exactly. So
we
There's
have
never
a
a building
we
there.
have a great picture of that. Would
yes,
that-
I was going to
we-
say the
yeah, Holly
the
pulled it up and
GIS maps show it fairly clearly if you have a picture of it, but it definitely makes me feel better because I had to do that research myself, and the broken ground site that we have is actually adjacent to land that the city owns that is also planning on thinning that land around the same time that we are clearing our land. So as part of like management, forest management, I'm feeling okay about the state of the forest that we are working with.
But also, isn't it also the case that the city's master plan has also included a school on that site
Right.
for a
Correct.
number of
For
years?
years.
Correct.
So that it is part of the master plan, not against
so
it.
this is what you were talking about. You can
Right.
see the difference.
Right.
So this is the site here in blue, and this is the area that the master plan talks about as broken ground. And sort of the western boundary of that broken ground area are the power lines that run to the east of the site.
Right. So I'm so glad that we have an opportunity to clarify this because I think it has been so confusing.
Yeah,
for
it's because
people
of that
to
area that
receive
that broken ground school was named it. It was
Yeah.
like, let's pick an area, it's like Abbott Downing is for the Stagecoach Company, and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it was like, I remember when it was named, that's how old I am.
Nice. Thank you for that history lesson,
I will
Barb.
just point out one other thing.
Yes, please.
This line here is the urban growth boundary that's part of the city master plan. So you can see that the school site falls within that urban growth boundary that's been established as part of the city master plan.
Thank you for that. And there's some excellent GIS if you guys are map nerds, even just through the city. There's some really excellent maps on what the city is trying to do in terms of preservation, watershed areas, timber harvest areas, things like that. It's really
There's an actual, I learned this on the Parks and Rec Committee, but there's an actual formula when you look at population and acreage in a community of how much parkland needs to exist that people can utilize, how much open space needs to exist that's just open. So a lot more work goes into it than I would have known as just a regular citizen, so.
Yep, I agree. We have a great city forester,
Yeah.
a great staff. They do an amazing job. The Joint City School Committee just met after a 4-year hiatus. I'm not sure if 4 years is accurate. What is the role of the committee? What authority does it have? Why were joint meetings not held before COVID? Why was the city not at the table to help determine infrastructure costs? This one's kind of a long one. The Concord School District and the City of Concord work together to discuss common areas, including budget, fields, infrastructure, transportation, supporting students, and joint initiatives such as supporting our homeless population and increasing equity. Each year, the Board of Education and City Council host a legislative breakfast to share updates with each other and to area elected officials. Members of the Board of Education and the City Council have met over the last several years. Due to time constraints, meetings haven't happened every year. These meetings are not required, but an opportunity to share work currently underway on the city and school side. I will say also that it's tough. The council and the board doesn't always meet, but staff are meeting. There are work meetings happening all the time that aren't necessarily in public and doesn't have the formality of our public setting, but work is getting done and then reported out to us. I do appreciate that work is getting done, and I do also look forward to more formal meetings with the city.
When I was first on the school board 8,000 years ago, the city school committee was a nothing committee. It met twice a year. It met at City Hall at 7:30 on a Friday morning. And it was basically Chris Rath and Thomas Bell going over everything they did. Because I was chair of it for a couple of years, and I would say, what should I put on the agenda? And was told, oh, no, there's no agenda. So it became a much more usable committee after Chris left and after Terry left, when we had Frank, during those sort of tumultuous years.
Months before COVID.
Yes, exactly. No, but it became, a year or two before COVID. So maybe Terry as well, but it became a much more active committee where a lot more conversations happened. But it was, for a long time, it was just a little reporting committee twice a year. That was it.
Yeah.
So it's better now.
Yeah, but I think
Yeah,
it is an
that's
important
good.
point that there is ongoing meetings with the city planning, engineering, traffic, staff, safety,
Safety.
assessing, budget, staffs,
Public Works.
public works.
Right.
We're a community that shares a lot more than a lot of communities between the city and the schools, so it's a good.
And just so you know, we have a meeting, City and Community Relations, one of your subcommittees, has already decided we're going to have a fall meeting, so we'll be meeting in the fall.
That's great.
The city will be hosting that one.
Oh, good.
Just the-
Yeah, and I just, I feel compassion for our constituents that maybe don't understand the full process of how a public meeting may work. Like, there's work going on in the background. It feels like it might be happening in a black box and not out in the open. But I do think we are doing our best to convey all the information that we have as we have it in public when we get it. It's a challenge, but it's a challenge I'm happy to take on. If there's any other comments on these, please let me know. Otherwise, Deb, if you're watching, we'll get the responses to your follow-ups via email.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Kara.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you.
Does anyone else have any other business? I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? Moved by Mr. Richards, second by Mr. Cotton. All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Any opposed? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.